Hi, everybody. My name's Sam,
And my name's Ben.
and we're
The Book Fair
Boys. Great. Do you think we got it?
It's wonderful, I'm sure.
Probably not.
I really hope.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm here to introduce you to our first minisode. When Sam and I sit down and do these impromptu conversations, we end up inevitably chasing a couple of rabbit trails, going down deer paths, or whatever your preferred metaphor for getting lost in the woods is. Inevitably, we end up having a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor, but we want to share with you some of the conversations that we had that are shorter, more condensed, and a little bit off topic. This was from week 1, Welcome to Dead House, and in it, Sam does his best to try and to talk about nostalgia in a time of corona while I keep trying to derail him. So I hope you enjoy our first minisode Book Fair Babblez.
I came across this article the other day that really stuck with me. It's from the New York Times, and I want to share a piece of it. It's called The Comfort of Childhood Media During Lockdown, and it's written by Amanda Hess. And it grabbed my attention because she talks about playing the 1990s immersive adventure game Myst.
Oh my god. Myst.
Did you play Myst?
Yeah, I played Myst, I played Riven. I can't remember what the third one was, but I played
Exile.
Exile, yes, I
Yeah.
did. I don't think I ever beat any of them, but I started several times really vigorously.
You had to be a genius to beat any of these games without a hint or a guide.
A code
or
book, yeah.
something. A code book, yeah. I remember playing Myst and Riven, and then I started Exile, but I never finished it.
Okay.
And so when lockdown started, I was stuck with my old PS2, and I only had one game, and that was Silent Hill.
Oh my god.
So I went to a store that I knew had old PS2 games. This is before everything was closed, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I got the original God of War, Exile, Myst 3,
Nice.
and Silent Hill 2. And which was a real find.
Yeah.
But so I was playing Exile, and it was a lot of fun, and it was easier than I remembered. I mean, I was playing it as like an 11 or 12-year-old when it was first.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and the puzzles seemed insanely complex, and they're still pretty complex, but it was easier to get through. And so this article really stood out to me as someone who was doing something similar to what I was doing. Amanda Hess writes, "The demand for isolation has knocked me out of my adult life and sent me into a state weirdly reminiscent of childhood, which is the last time I was confined to my bedroom, my free will constrained by a higher authority."
It's true. There is something about this that feels a lot like those beach house summer days where you're like, okay, here's a book. I don't really have anything to do on the calendar, and I'm just going to lay down on the bed and read for a little while. Or
Yeah.
I'm going to pull out my N64 and try to play some video games for a bit. There's no wonder that like afternoon TV movies like Die Hard were rolling on TNT nonstop because you could just sit there and watch them as a kid on those afternoons.
Right.
So.
Right. There was a really good dichotomy as a kid where you were either working or having fun. There was no in-between zone where like now as a quote unquote writer, there's always this space I inhabit even when I'm having fun where I'm like, why aren't you working? Why aren't you writing?
Yeah.
Or like, you're enjoying this story. Why don't you make a story that you could also enjoy? Like, why don't you enjoy telling yourself a story rather than fucking replaying God of War?
All I know is now that you've mentioned Myst, that sound, the wom, 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 you know what I mean? That sound that happened every time you'd move to a new world. That's stuck in my head. I'm just hearing the wom.
It really threw me for a loop because the last time I've heard that sound was probably 2006. And so when I picked it up again and I got zapped to like the first world, it plays you the sound as you're like dumped onto the ground. And I was like, oh, fuck, we're in it now. And then you see like the bad guy. And it was that period of time when they had like the real life actors.
Yes. And record their videos.
Yeah, and so you would get these weird celebrity cameos, like in the Goosebumps Escape from Horrorland game, Jeff Goldblum plays Dracula, and so you're playing this like kind of silly like 98 PC game, and all of a sudden Jeff Goldblum shows up. And so the villain in Exile is played by Brad Dourif.
I don't know who that is.
You don't know famous actor Brad Dourif?
No.
Um,
Remind me.
he was the original Chucky in Child's Play.
Okay. All right.
And,
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that guy. So he was the villain in
Okay.
Exile.
All right.
So then Amanda Hess goes on to say that the term nostalgia was first coined in 1688 by Swiss physician Johann Hofer. He defined it as the melancholy that originates from the desire to return to one's homeland. He believed that nostalgia could result in insomnia, stupor, and even death.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to tell that to Marvel Studios.
Oh, jeez, yeah. You're killing us all. Hofer, Hess goes on to say, Hofer described nostalgia as a pain that originated from separation, a feeling born of social isolation.
Huh.
It's more about the disappointments of reality than the draw of the nostalgia object itself. So, and then she says, there's all this shit going on now, and the world is such a scary place to be in that you just feel, it's not so much that you miss your childhood as you feel seized by it. Quote, "It's a memory for my mind to visit when my body can't go anywhere else, and a vain attempt to grasp control over my surroundings."
Huh. That's interesting.
Thoughts? Feelings?
There's been a lot of writing about nostalgia over the last couple of years, and it's interesting to think about it in the framework of the lockdown. People have been chasing childhood comforts since, I don't know, since the Marvel movies started 10 years ago, but even before that. It is interesting to think about nostalgia as a pain rather than as a sort of market segment or genre.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like the original, like, for example, the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie and the first X-Men movie that came out around the same time were just about making these heroes deserved a good movie and we'll make that good movie for them. But now it's like, how many elements can we throw in from your childhood experience of these movies or of these characters into these movies? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about the experience. What I like about what Amanda's writing here, Miss Hess, Ms. Hess, is, so much of nostalgia is thought of right now as the experience of the market object versus like the physical experience that you go through when you're actually seeing the thing or, sort of smelling the thing or whatever it is. The first thing I think of is like weaponized nostalgia. I read this article a couple of weeks ago about how the Star Wars, the new series, had specifically focused on taking nostalgia items and weaponizing them to create very specific experiences at very specific time points in the movie. And, this guy went through and like pointed out several moments that were designed very clearly to tickle those funny bones. But like, that's the way that it's been talked about, right? Is it's talked about as a thing that can be implemented versus, sort of a quasi comforting experience, and the limitations. I mean, I don't know. There's something about experiencing it within the context of, again, being stuck. Something a situation that's like childhood.
Well, and there's got to be a rebel against that, or a rebellion against that too. I mean, if you feel like you are being given something that's weaponized instead of something that's a comfort, there's got to be it somewhere in your brain that's like, and I feel like that's why people roll their eyes when they're like, oh Jesus, like why is this fucking old thing from the original trilogy in this part, like why like instead of being like, oh cool, they're playing the chess game on the Millennium Falcon, you're like, oh Jesus Christ, like and there were so many moments like that in Rise of Skywalker, for example, that just like you could feel the audience be like, oh fuck you.
There's definitely poorly implemented, and there's also elements of timing. I mean, I think the Star Wars series has become a little bit of like the ad absurdum, right? It's like the idea taken to its absurd length when it comes to how effective nostalgia can actually be and how it can be implemented effectively. But I don't know. I mean, it's not working. There's a reason that it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise, and a reason that Disney's doing so well, and a reason that they aren't making new movies and are remaking The Lion King and Aladdin and Mulan now. So
it's true. Yeah, there's a huge market for it. And I mean, you have a relationship with these pieces, even just in your imagination. You've really grown up with them. And that's sort of the squirmy feeling you get in a relationship with anybody, whether it's a friendship or something romantic, where like you can tell this person is only doing something to please you. And you're like, oh, gross.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, it's like you're on a date with someone and they're like, oh, well, I'll do this. But like, you can tell that they're only doing that because you said you like bowling.
Yeah.
They don't actually want to bowl, and so you're just like, oh well.
Where's the you that's underneath all of these interactions?
Yeah, right, and it's got to be some of the same sort of synapses that are activated when you're like, oh, you don't actually care about showing us the new Spider-Man suit. You're only showing us because you know that we like different Spider-Man suits.
Yeah, it's true. So now that we've like completely undermined all of the emotions that we're going for.
Now that we've talked about how much nostalgia is bad. So yeah, thinking about all this lately and the idea of a good formula, just telling a good story in a good formula.
Yeah.
And I think nobody does that better than some of the people that we experienced as kids.